All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Engineering Major Philosophy Minor. Happy Monday. Today is Monday, November 9th, and when I got into the office this morning, I had a very special Monday surprise awaiting for me, which is going to be the topic of this video. Before I get into that, of course, EMPM is the spot where you can get a working aerospace engineer's opinions on topics pertaining to engineering, philosophy, politics, and various other social issues. And in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about stock market or just general free market philosophy and how that relates to politics, because as I mentioned, when I got into the office this morning, I had a very special surprise waiting for me. So, as somebody who is working in a professional career, I of course have a 401k. That is one form of investment that you guys may have, that I have, and that is directly tied to the markets. In fact, if you have not looked into this, of course, basically a 401k is just a fancy stock portfolio, and you can choose to put contributions into your 401k either pre-tax or post-tax. That's the advantage of the 401k, is that you can put dollars in pre-tax. But of course, in addition to your 401k, typically the investment company or the brokerage company that your company works with to provide the 401k usually has the option for you to create your own personal brokerage account so that you can trade and play with stocks in the market that aren't necessarily available to go directly into your 401k. So before I just go off on too much on a tangent, if you are a young man or a young woman and you have not started on your investment journey or starting your own personal brokerage account, I highly recommend just starting one. Most of these investment companies make it very easy for you to just put in some initial investments. In fact, you can buy like one share of a stock and just let it hang out there. Like, let's say you wanted to buy, Apple stock or something, which I think is trading at about 118 per share as of today. Just put in 118 bucks, you get one share of Apple. Now, the nice thing is that the dividend that Apple pays will be quarterly, and sometimes you can often beat interest rates that you might have if you were to just simply put your money into a savings account. So I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but if you have not gotten started on your independent investing kind of outside of your 401k, just as an aside, this is definitely something that you should do. The stock market is open for everybody, anyone, race, creed, color, gender, whatever. As long as you've got dollars, you can put them in the stock market and you can see how they do, and you stand to either make a lot of money or have stable rate of returns for a long time in addition to your 401k. All right, so let me just go ahead and show you what I saw this morning. So you probably have been looking at this picture up on my screen for a little bit. Right here, we've got a picture of Joe Biden. Now, this is the image that was at the beginning of the day. You can see that the Dow jumped up by 1,200 points, and it says, markets soar to record highs after upbeat vaccine data, comma, Biden victory. So we're actually going to go ahead and look at this article, but right at the onset when I saw this, my immediate first thought was, there is no way they're going to tie this gain in the market to the fact that the media has said that Biden is predicted to be the president-elect. And then, of course, up here in the corner, we see a contrast with the incumbent. These attacks on experts are going to haunt us, doctor says. Of course, referring to the way that Trump has referred to Dr. Fauci. So we'll actually get into this article in a second, but first I want to focus on this. All right, so the Dow added well over 1,000 points after Pfizer and biotech said their vaccine candidate was more than 90% effective at preventing COVID-19. So first and foremost, this is really awesome news. There are a lot of people who are saying like, oh, this is like weird timing and, there's this conspiracy. Honestly, having worked for an engineering company for a very long time, knowing people in the biotech industry and stuff like that, I think that this is just a complete coincidence. So this is not a conspiracy theory video. However, the issue that I have with this is there is no possible way that a Biden victory is something that made the markets positive. And what we'll see in a second is this article tries to make that argument. But before we get into that, let me just say, here's what the stocks were trading at the beginning of the day. These are stocks that I follow. So you're telling me A company like Caterpillar, a company like ExxonMobil is the biggest natural gas fossil fuel producer in the United States. The airlines, Southwest, Boeing, General Electric, which makes natural gas turbines as well as other gas turbines for commercial aviation use and military use. You're telling me that all these companies that are solely dependent on fossil fuels, like fossil fuels are essential to their business, you're telling me that they jumped in some cases 6%, even up to 10%, or a little bit over 10%, because the guy who wants to eliminate all fossil fuel usage within the next 15 years got elected president? No, that just doesn't make any sense. You're telling me that an airline jumped 11.2% for a alleged president-elect who is in favor of further lockdowns and further government restrictions on the free market. No, 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 no. That's complete BS, all right? I don't believe that for a second. The reason, in my opinion, why these stocks soared is because they saw that there was good vaccine data, and the market response was, if there's a good vaccine and we can start administering it to people, we can open up again. That is why the market's doing so well. And by the way, that's why the market crashed, because the government forced everybody to lock down. The market did not crash because of coronavirus. The market did not just crash on its own magically after coronavirus, like Democrats want to claim. So just as an aside, you can watch one of my earlier videos where I talk about these two options that Democrats like to say about how, because they don't want to admit that government intervention is what caused the market crash, because if they admitted that government intervention caused the crash, then they couldn't justify more lockdowns ever. Let's take a look at what the stocks ended at for the day. Here we have Southwest up 10%, Caterpillar up 6%, ExxonMobil up almost 13%, Boeing up 13%, General Electric up almost 8%. So we're going to go ahead and start reading this article, but you'll notice something interesting here. Market soars record highs. So this article, well, now the headline is Dow climbs 835 points to pare some gains after soaring to a record intraday high. I don't know why these headlines don't line up, but I'm pretty sure this is this. I'm sure this is the same article here. So let's go ahead and listen to this. Stocks sailed to record highs on Monday before paring some gains as traders took in promising data on leading COVID vaccine candidate, as well as President-elect Joe Biden's victory in the U.S. presidential election, ending a days-long nail-biter over which candidate would prevail in winning the White House. So, first of all, we don't know for sure that Biden actually won. The media is trying to claim that something that isn't actually for sure is part of the reason why stocks are jumping. No, 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 no. This is the important part right here, that the market believes that if we can start administering vaccines, we can open up without issue. So there's actually further evidence of the claim here in the very article. The NASDAQ lagged and closed in negative territory, however, as hopes for a vaccine prompted traders to turn away from software stocks and other members of, quote, stay-at-home trade. Shares of Zoom Video Communications, Peloton each sold off on Monday. However, stocks poised to benefit from a broader economic reopening, including airlines, cruise lines, and lodging firms each surged. So that's exactly what I thought when I saw this thing. I was like, you know what's going to happen is there's all this optimism because they think we can open up, and it's further confirmed by the fact that all these stocks related to things for us staying at home dipped, right? Now, let's go ahead and skip to this section right here. Clarity around the results of the presidential election also helped fuel a market rally. Wrong. I disagree with this completely. Biden, alongside Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, is set to usher in a push for bigger fiscal stimulus, a public option in healthcare, investment in sustainability, and more measured approach to foreign policy and trade, among other key issues. So almost none of these are reasons why the market would improve. Perhaps fiscal stimulus might help it briefly for a second, and there is a fair argument that fiscal stimulus is necessary. I don't think there should be any more fiscal stimulus. I think they simply just need to open up. It's obvious from the gains in the market today that even just the optimism of opening back up entirely has led to huge gains in the market and in productivity. And of course, we've seen unemployment numbers being better in the past couple months than they have been because states are slowly starting to open up. So I think that this is BS, right? Kamala Harris and Biden have repeatedly talked about ushering in a new set of lockdowns. The fiscal stimulus is fine, except they've talked about repealing Trump tax cuts, increasing corporate tax rates, introducing a wealth tax, and of course, that on top of certain states which have very aggressive taxes is very economically stifling. Public option healthcare, that is another thing that markets aren't good for, especially that markets aren't interested in, especially in the healthcare sector. So there's a very interesting quote from Thomas Sowell. And if you guys don't know who Thomas Sowell is, I highly recommend the book Discrimination and Disparities from Thomas Sowell. Other than that, he's got a long list of YouTube videos, debates, public speaking, interviews, etc. on YouTube dating back to like the 70s. But Thomas Sowell has an interesting quote, and the quote goes something along the lines of, the government doesn't get charged a different amount for healthcare than the individual does. However, the government can refuse to pay the expenses of healthcare. So what that means is that your doctor or whatever is going to charge the government the same price that they would charge you, except the government is not going to reimburse them with the same amount as if they just charged you. And this is what happened with Obamacare, is a ton of doctors and a ton of hospitals and stuff like that basically had to go away from Obamacare reimbursement because the government wasn't going to reimburse the same amount of money, and decided to become private practices, which actually increased the healthcare costs for a lot of people, or basically meant that people who had Obamacare or who had certain regular insurances couldn't keep their same doctor. So that's kind of what happened there. Investment in sustainability, well, I just talked about a second ago. How is it possible that all the companies that rely heavily on fossil fuels are interested in investment in sustainability? They're just simply not. Now, I'll make more videos about sustainability and the environmental side of this, but just for sake of example in this video, you're telling me that ExxonMobil, again, the biggest producer of natural gas, fossil fuels in the United States, is interested in sustainability? I don't think so. Joe Biden talked about ending fracking. That's a big part of their business. And finally, a more measured approach to foreign policy and trade, among other key issues. So right now I am reading Free to Choose from Milton Friedman. I think I mentioned this in another video. And Milton Friedman is actually a big proponent of free trade. And I am actually a proponent of freer trade as well. However, I think that there's an important caveat which it seems as if this book, Free to Choose, has not yet addressed. Maybe I haven't gotten there. But the issue comes in when the government is over-regulating businesses in the nation that's interested in free trade, and therefore the businesses in that nation can't be competitive with outside businesses. And that's essentially what happened with so many industries, is that unfortunately, labor unions and high minimum wage laws and things like this made it so that it was more economical for businesses to do business overseas. Combine that with free trade, and you've basically got an unlimited market, labor market in foreign countries than you do in the United States. So, of course, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have called for stronger labor unions, have called for stronger public sector unions. This is very typical of Democrats who are very interested in big government, and they've called for extreme increases in the minimum wage. And of course, living in the state of California, which has one of the highest minimum wages in the nation, we can see how that in part has basically hurried along the economic devastation of the government lockdowns, because businesses have to pay such a higher price for labor here in California. Let's go ahead and move on to this article right here. Coronavirus. These attacks on exports are going to haunt us. President Trump recently hinted that if he were to be reelected, he would consider firing Dr. Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, after months of the president largely ignoring Fauci's medical advice. So this just straight up isn't true that Trump has been ignoring it. You guys have to understand that Fauci is one guy on one team of several teams, of several people, of several advisors, and to kind of boil all of the quote unquote best and most important expert advice on coronavirus down to this one guy who I'm sure that he knows the data really well, but doesn't probably understand public policy very well, which is evident from being one of the first people to come out and condemn usage of masks. Then all of a sudden he said we need to wear masks and we need to use face goggles. And then he said that the initial lockdowns, where everybody was literally at home doing nothing but watching Netflix, were not severe enough, and expected it to somehow be more severe than that. I mean, you're going to tell me that this guy is the best medical advisor, and then he just gets peddled around by the media and gets put on the covers of magazines and stuff like that, and therefore we're supposed to think that everything Dr. Fauci says is in consideration of the 50 or 60 other opinions that the president has to take into account every single day. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And on top of that, to say that Trump hasn't listened to any medical advice when everywhere in the nation has masks, we got ventilators to everybody, we developed therapeutics, we obviously had good, promising results on a vaccine. It's the fastest that a vaccine's ever been developed. It was developed under Operation Warp Speed. It was developed under Trump. And then to have the media criticize Trump, basically saying that we're not going to take the vaccine if it was developed under President Trump, not realizing the fact that you're not just going to go back and redevelop a vaccine once Biden gets, you're not going to throw out all the research from Pfizer right when Biden becomes president. You know what I mean? So it's just ridiculous. I mean, I don't think that it would be of any detriment to fire Dr. Fauci, because at this point, we've basically done everything we possibly can with regards to the coronavirus, except for doing another round of lockdowns. I mean, Biden has talked about issuing a national mask mandate. I don't really see what the point of that is, considering everyone around the nation is already masking up. And by the way, it's still spreading even though we're masking. And on top of that, if you are on the political left, apparently you can go out and riot in the streets and do whatever you want and gather in large crowds. But if you simply just want to lead a law-abiding normal life, right, you're not really allowed to do that. So, I mean, President Trump, if he was to get reelected, probably should fire Dr. Fauci. New President-elect Joe Biden unveiled his own coronavirus task force on Monday morning and has promised to listen to experts and follow the science amid the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Okay, congratulations, another task force. So we already had that, right? And if you really wanted to follow the science, what you'd do is you'd look at how coronavirus affects people of different age demographics, and you would be willing to take a more tailored approach to who gets locked down and who does not. In any case, the current White House shunning of scientific experts has taken a toll. Dr. Fauci and Deborah Birx were in almost every single one of Trump's press conferences when he held a press conference every single day for 4 months. They had plenty of airtime to get their opinions out. Trump had many, many discussions with them. Trump has to listen to many, many different experts. Joe Biden will have to listen to many, many different experts. It's not like it just boils down to this one guy, Dr. Fauci. And if you ignore what Dr. Fauci says on one aspect of what is a very complicated problem, that all of a sudden this is what leads to ruin, right? This is a respiratory disease that spreads through people talking with each other in relatively close contact and on surfaces and people touching their face and stuff like that. You guys, people need to realize how many of these potential risky interactions really occur every single day, no matter how much you lock down. In fact, the more you lock down, the more you put people close to each other as well. So to act like this is just like a very simple problem with a very simple solution, and if you just listen to Dr. Fauci, who has gone back and forth on his positions throughout the entire time, basically, and the left, who has gone back and forth on their position about vaccines the entire time. I mean, to act like it's just that simple, and once you get a Democrat in who, quote unquote, listens to the experts, when the experts haven't been correct all the time, is a little bit ridiculous, right? So, I mean, just consider that. Okay, here we go. Quote, "You have to remember the fact that Dr. Fauci is being attacked not for any vice or mistake, but for his virtue." No, Dr. Fauci's being attacked because he was wrong and because he's trying to make his case for certain public policies when it's not in agreement with the rest of the fact pattern that's going on in the nation. Science is what's going to get us out of this pandemic. God, these stories are just, they're so frustrating. Like, we have plenty of data, we've done plenty of science, and it still spreads, right? Does President Trump dictate, or did President Trump dictate every single individual state's policies? No, right? So who in the US like has not been doing the best they can to follow science? Like, let's pretend for a second that the article is right about President Trump and he has just been ignoring science the whole time, right? Well, then the next step down the line of command is the individual state governors who have been able to make their own laws and make their own rules and set their own lockdown standards and everything the entire time. So, for example, in California, here's the data right here. Here's deaths. Here's cases. Every single county in California. I mean, we've been wearing masks the whole time. We've been social distancing the whole time. We got locked down for a very extended period of time. Most of California is still locked down. The spread continues. So what part of the science are we supposed to follow, right? What part of the science proved that the human race is actually capable of stopping the spread of this, right? We just got a vaccine. So if science is going to save us from the pandemic, why don't Democrats stop criticizing the fact that a vaccine was developed simply because it happened with Trump as president? Again, Trump isn't the one who's down in the lab mixing up stuff in test tubes and then, telling the lab researchers what data is good and what data is bad and designing the experiments for the lab researchers and literally collecting the data, right? Like, he's not the guy doing this, right? It's the companies that are doing this. And it just so happens that he's president. And by the way, him being president gave these companies grants so that they had money to do this critical research despite lockdowns. So, I mean, yeah, okay, science will save the pandemic, except we've been masking up and we've been locking down the whole time and there's still spread. And then when a vaccine finally comes out, all you guys want to say is that, oh, the market soars because of a Biden victory. And I guess, okay, vaccine data is cool, but it's really Biden. It's really a Democrat. I mean, give me a break, right? This is so ridiculous. So I'm going to end the video right here. Leave your thoughts, comments below. I appreciate all the comments and all the thoughts. I think I may have gotten like a spam comment on one of my previous videos because it's just like a random link to something, which don't click on if you guys see that. Maybe not. But anyway, I hope you guys have a good night. Kind of had to make this video just because I think this stuff by the media is a little bit ridiculous. Of course, they hold Biden up on a pedestal when he hasn't actually ever done anything. And then they put Trump down in a ditch when he's actually been the one who's doing things the entire time. And we've done everything we can, and there's still spread. And we need to open up because that's obviously what the market wants. And, I don't think there should be any more stimulus, but there's a good argument for more stimulus. Anyway, guys, have a good night. I'm going to end it right now.